Welcome to Lingua Latina per se illustrata, capitulum duodecimum, lesson 2. This one's called What's It to You? And it's all about the dative of possession. Let's see what we're going to be learning today. So, of course, our primary lesson today is going to be about the dative of possession. This is one of the main ideas in this chapter, but we've got a couple of other things we're going to talk about as well. For example, we're going to talk about irregular commands. There are a handful of verbs that have short, irregular commands in Latin. We'll learn about those today. And finally, we're going to learn about the dative case with a couple of intransitive verbs that are important for us in this chapter. Let's get started. We're going to start with topic number 1, the dative of possession. And the first person we're going to use today to help us out is our friend Marcus. Now, we know that Marcus has a sister, and her name is Julia. Now, the way we normally express this is we say, Marcus, let's put this right here, Marcus unam sororem habet, using the accusative here. Let me get my pointer. Using the accusative form here, unam sororem, and the verb habet. But the Romans liked to express this kind of possession in a slightly different way. The Romans liked to use the dative case to show this kind of personal relationship. This is possession not in the sense of owning a book or owning a villa or something like that. This is a personal relationship. So let's express that possession in a different way. This is how the Romans would have liked to have expressed it. They would have said, Marco una soror est. Now, we notice this big difference right here. Marcus became Marco. So we're saying, in a sense, to Marcus, there is a sister or one sister. But of course, that's not a very idiomatic translation. What we would say idiomatically is Marcus has a sister. The way that Latin expresses that, though, is Marco to Marcus. Marco una soror est. Well, we know that Julia, another point of view we can have is the point of view of Julia. So let's move Julia down here. And we would say, of course, that Julia has two brothers. And those brothers are Marcus and Quintus. Well, how would we express that in Latin? In Latin, we would say Juliae, again, using the dative case for Julia, which is a first declension noun. Juliae duo fratres sunt. Sunt, of course, because we're talking about two brothers. There are two brothers to Julia, or in other words, Julia has two brothers. Juliae duo fratres sunt. This is called the dative of possession, using the dative case to show possession, to show a close relationship between a person and something else. Let's look at a couple of other important sentences that we should, oops, that's the wrong button. A couple of important sentences that we want to keep in mind or hold in our minds as examples of the dative of possession. Here's a real common one. Quod nomen est patri. So here we have, this is my new little pointer here. There we go. Quod nomen est patri. So we have patri in the dative case here. And of course, how would we answer that? We would answer that with ei nomen est Lucius Iulius Balbus. Ei being the dative case of the third person pronoun, meaning to him, is the name Lucius Iulius Balbus, or he has the name Lucius Iulius Balbus. Another question we might ask is, or rather, this is a statement rather than a question. Aemiliae est unus frater. To Aemilia is a brother, or Aemilia has one brother. Cui Aemilius nomen est. Cui is the relative pronoun to whom. To whom Aemilius is the name. Again, showing possession, the dative of possession. Aemiliae est unus frater cui Aemilius nomen est. If we want to look at the names of the boys, we can look at it this way, and you'll see here that we've got filiis is the dative plural, the second declension. Filiis nomina sunt. Why is it nomina? It's nomina now, nomina sunt, because we're talking about the names that belong to the sons, filiis. Filiis nomina sunt Marcus Julius Balbus et Quintus Julius Balbus. So here we have several examples of the dative of possession in play in ways that are very important and common for us in this chapter. You'll notice that Julius and the boys all have what's called the tria nomina, the three names of the Roman male citizen. We'll be talking about that in a separate video that's attached to this assignment as well. Topic 2 we're going to address relatively quickly because it's relatively simple. It's the idea of irregular commands. There are 5 verbs that have irregular short commands in Latin. The verbs are esse, ducere, dicere, facere, ferre. And of course those verbs mean to be, esse, to lead, ducere, to say or to speak, dicere, to do, to make, facere, and to carry or to bear, as in a soldier carrying his arms, ferre. The irregular commands are very simple. Es, duc, dic, fac, fer. Those are the 5 short irregular commands that we need to be able to recognize and understand as we're reading through this chapter and future chapters. And of course, just for to be thorough, I'll include the plural form of the commands. Este, ducite, dicite, facite, ferte. There we go. That's all there is to it. These are just simply things that need to be committed to memory. Es, duc, dic, fac, fer. Our final topic, topic 3, is the dative with intransitive verbs. First of all, let's just refresh on what an intransitive verb is. An intransitive verb is simply a verb that's not completed by an accusative direct object, as we normally see, as in, for example, Marcus Juliam pulsat. Pulsat would be transitive because it's completed by an accusative direct object. Intransitive verbs are not completed by an accusative direct object. So with an intransitive verb, it's often the case that the person that's affected by the action of that verb is expressed using the dative case. And we have 2 verbs of that kind in this chapter. We have the verb to command, which is imperare. It's familiar. It sounds like imperator or emperor, right? Imperare. And then, of course, we have the famous verb parere, to obey. And you remember what parere becomes if we leave off those macrons. So let's see how this... If we have our verb to command, imperare, and of course the one doing the commanding is the imperator or the dux, the leader or general, we would use a sentence like this. Dux exercitui imperat. Dux exercitui imperat. Now you notice that exercitui is in the dative. That's the person, let's just say for simplicity's sake, the person being affected by this intransitive verb, dux exercitui imperat. Okay, so let's see what happens now. What is the army going to do? The army is the one that's going to be obeying parere. So the army, when the dux gives the orders, exercitus, the army, exercitus duci suo paret. Exercitus duci suo paret. So we've got here the exercitus, okay, is obeying or obeys. Now who's affected by that obeying? The leader, duci suo. So that's what's in the dative case. So dative with intransitive verbs, we really only have to keep in mind imperare and parere. And remember that the one that goes in the dative case is the one that's being affected by the action described by the intransitive verb. So we've talked about 3 things today. The first thing we talked about was the dative of possession. It was our main idea in this lesson. We also went through very simple irregular commands, 5 of them that we just have to commit to memory. And then finally, the dative with intransitive verbs. Also very simple because there are only 2 verbs that we really have to keep in mind, imperare and parere. That concludes lesson number 2 for Cap 12, What's It to You? I hope that you have found this tutorial to be helpful. See you soon.